Marshall McLuhan was an accomplished literary critic and historian who became interested in the cultural and anthropological effects of electronic communications, specifically TV and later the computer. He observed early in the 1950s that the new media of TV and electronic communications can create events much larger than any of us, because electronic mediums communicate tribally as a new mythic form. Towards the end of his life, McLuhan became concerned about how to resist the consuming forces of the myth-forming powers of new media by outlining strategies to identify the new emerging patterns that would free us from the destructive energies of old patterns of adaptation. He used the allegory of the descent into the maelstrom, a story by Edgar Allan Poe, to illustrate the life-saving strategy of identifying a pattern when trapped in the swirling maelstrom of forces beyond our individual control. And to do that, you have to release yourself completely from fear, become disinterested in your own death, and your mind becomes at that point free to understand the phenomena happening around you. Today's media has proven its power to shift and shape consensus reality to the extent that the people are challenged to distinguish between what is virtual, what is simulated, and what is natural reality. Judy Wood is someone gifted with the ability to detect the patterns in the chaos, and as we shall see shortly, in the maelstroms of weather phenomena that are changing the globe. She trusts her senses and the skills she has learned as a materials engineer with a special expertise in moire interferometry, a method which applies laser technology to measure changes in the shape of objects when unseen forces are applied. She asks us as fellow observers to apply our own skills of detection and logic as she presents her ongoing research into the anomalies surrounding the events of 9/11. Dr. Wood's academic training and background is impressive and is outlined in the short bio in your program, but what is not in the bio is the quality of her dedication and sense of urgency she brings to an issue that can deflect the current momentum of tyrannical forces at play in the world if we know the patterns to look for that can help us to expose and bring to justice those who harm humanity and the planet. She's engaged in uncovering and revealing the physical evidence of what happened on 9/11 on two fronts. As a primary litigant in two lawsuits, one a request for corrections of the NIST report, and the other an ongoing qui tam lawsuit on behalf of the citizens of the United States against two manufacturers of directed energy weapons, as well as other parties implicated in the fraud perpetrated by the NIST report and not fulfilling its mandate to explain the destruction of the World Trade Center towers. On the second front, Judy has been relentless in her research of the physical evidence and has made available to the public in numerous radio broadcasts and at her website 6 different studies, and the URLs are provided in your program. The 6th and most recent study is what she'll be introducing this evening, 9/11 weather anomalies and field effects. I invite you to listen to what Dr. Wood has to say, engage in questions and dialogue after she speaks, and please welcome Dr. Judy Wood.
Thank you. So we start out with, I'd like to think about Rene Davila. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. He gave a testimony after 9/11 in part of the ongoing interviews of all the first responders. And he just recently passed away. Let's see. And instead of attempting to fit the facts around your perception, expand your perception to fit the facts. We'll just be looking at the facts, at the evidence today. So in some of the comments that Renee had made, I would like to point out. which is very interesting after John's presentation. He was an emergency medical technician, and he had a bag. He says, I've still got my bag. I hold it like a trophy, like people collect basketballs. I haven't touched whatever the force was. It was so strong it went inside the bag. I'm curious if this is like what he had in his bag. It's interesting about they asked him, was there a fire on his vehicle? What fire? Fire? We saw the sucker blow up. We heard a boom. There were a lot of oxygen tanks, the Scott packs that were in the fire trucks. Apparently they were exploding. There's quite a few of the firefighters who were testifying that the Scott packs were exploding, which is interesting. Pressurized air tanks exploding at ground level. And some more of his comments. There's like a wave coming. Something knocked me. I don't know what it was. And we were going through the lobby into the Millennium Hotel. Something knocked me. I don't know if something hit my helmet or if it was a force. And then he later talks about, as he's in there, this force is still coming through the cracks of the door. I see coats. I saw a water fountain, so I got the clothes wet and stepped them under the door. What force was coming under the door? Very intriguing comments that he made. So a little bit of an outline here. We'll be talking first about the background, and then the new material. There it goes. But for those who, the older material, the background, is material that I've presented in the past. So we'll go over it fairly quickly, but it deserves going over. My vocabulary. I've assigned words to phenomena I don't understand. Instead of saying it's smoke or it's dust. Dustification. The building turned to dust. We're not going to define how it did, but we know it turned to dust. So, dustification. Does that look like a collapse to you? I mean, this report claimed this was a collapse. They investigated collapse. From the Midwest, we call this a bubbler, drinking fountain that's constantly on. That's what it looks like to me. And when the North Tower went poof, part of it remained, some of the core columns, just for a few seconds, and then they turned to dust right before the camera. So viewing it from the northeast, there are those remaining core columns. You get to do it one more time. Just turns to dust right in front of the camera. What would cause something to do that? Well, it did indeed turn to dust. Here's where those core columns were standing that you saw faint, and this is all that's left of this rubble pile. We're looking from this perspective. We should see a big tower between us and Building 7. Building 7, you may know, went poof later that day. So we know what day this picture was taken, and it looks like it's about noontime. So this was shortly after both towers had gone poof. And there's nothing much except ground level. This is the pedestrian walkway, the north pedestrian walkway. You could still get under it. But here was a 110-story building, and here's an 8-story building. And the 8-story building towers over the pile. Unless they call it a pile. That's the 8-story building. So from a distance away, that's approximately what this became. Why has it taken so long for someone to ask, where'd the building go? I think that's a pretty good indication of what a psyops this was. Psychological operation. These are the first folks to come out of their cubby holes from hiding after the second tower went away. You can tell from their posture, they're just shocked. My gosh, there should be a building there. Hands on the hips, arms folded. This is the corner, the closest corner to Tower 1. There's just paper in the street. Where'd the building go? Someone posted this on a forum, and I thought it was just so well stated. We stand at the beginning of a new age. Our government has in its hands a method of disrupting the molecular basis for matter, and its first impulse was to weaponize this. Is that so hard to understand, like splitting atoms to create destruction was hard to understand in 1945? Of course, this new invention came when the United States ruled supreme. A weapon system of vast power comes online, and we don't have an enemy worthy of it. So we use it on ourselves. Wag the dog. Fuzzballs. So I turn this. I call this the fuzzball intersection. And you can see where it's located. Here's Tower 2, Tower 1, and it's up in that corner. What's interesting is it's upwind shortly after Tower 1 goes away, and you can see this blue sky. The dust has settled out of the air down to the ground. But wait a minute, what is this fine dust starting to come up around their feet? Like little fuzzballs around their feet. This was an aha moment for me. This is about 15 minutes after the North Tower went poof. The dust that settled had to be coarse dust to settle down, but now why is it coming up? Because it's continuing to break down. And then later when people are walking around, that fine of dust cannot have settled out of the air that quickly. And these people have just come out of their hiding places. Rolled up carpet. That's what I call this. This picture's in the NIST report. These are the outer columns. They're in groups of 3 with a spandrel belt going between them. They're 3 stories tall and 3 columns wide. I call those sets of columns wheat checks because they look like wheat checks. They're sticking in the ground. But they're rolled up like a rolled up carpet. Is that how the building failed? Well, if you have this force pushing down on the outer columns, and if you get buckling, which is what we're told, buckling causes a bowing out in this direction. And here's a Red Bull can getting smashed. It bends around a horizontal axis, not a vertical axis. The bending we see in these beams doesn't look like you would expect in buckling. Buckling, things bend outward. Why is this bent in a U-turn? Smooth curvature, no cracks in the metal. And more than 180-degree bend. Why would it bend like that? Can that be buckling? These are on the FEMA website. I call these rolled-up carpets down here. It looks like wet tissue is draped over this thing. The way the metal turned to jelly, flopped over, and then resolidified. That's what it appears. And again, these are curved around the building axis. So these are what we see. That kind of bend on the roll-up carpet, which is a bend in this direction. It doesn't make sense for buckling to cause something to bend in that direction. For the structure, you have floors attached, and you might have pushing or pulling, which would cause bending around a horizontal axis like you see here. That's what the kind of motion you get with buckling. You don't get this kind of curling around the building. But that's what we see in the, what few beams there are remaining look like that. I call this one the burrito. Who knows what this is? It looks like moist cake batter just flopped up. It doesn't look like buckling. And this one has a sharp curvature where the spandrel belts are connected to the columns. What would cause that? It just sagged. Across the street from Tower 2 was the Bankers Trust building. Had that gash in the front? How did that gash get there? Certainly the little wheat checks found in it didn't carve out this huge gaping hole. But in the FEMA report is this picture, as though the photographer was saying, look at me, look at me, look at this. Look at that beam. It's a horizontal beam. And if you had too much load on it, it's either going to bend this way or bend that way. It doesn't do that. And you have even holes through here. You can see daylight through those holes. What would cause a beam to do this? And they even stated there was no fire in that building. We have another beam here that's interesting. It's curved in that direction. If you have a beam loaded this way, it's going to sag. It's not going to curve this way. How did that get curved in that direction? I believe this is a sample of John's of molybdenum and copper. It's kind of interesting how easily it bends. That was one of the samples. But notice there's no clamping marks. There's no place where a torch was put to it. It just bends. Remind you of any pieces of beams we've seen? Then I got into studying the dust plume. Let's see what we can learn from the dust plume. Fumes. Does that look like smoke from a fire burning? It wafted upwards and upwards. For some reason, it needed to go up, and it went down the eastern seaboard. How do other fires look? Oh, this is another picture that was taken a few days later. You have clouds over here, casting a shadow, but here you have that fuming, whatever it is. It doesn't look like clouds. And from a satellite image, we see that white fuming stuff coming upward. But look at this other cloud. This is fascinating. Closer image here. Black stuff, it's color-coded. The black stuff goes west over the Hudson. The white stuff goes up and south. Now, if the wind's blowing the same direction over ground zero as ground zero, I mean, it's one place. Why do you get fumes of one color going one direction and fumes of another color going another direction? And how does that compare to, the California wildfires? How does that look by comparison? Or the Kuwait oil fires? This kind of just tumbles out. It's got a lot of particulate in it. This is more of a chemical fire. This looks, to me, different. It looks more like the oil fire than it does the forest fires, but it still looks very different. And nothing looks like this, or this wafting up that's got translucent fumes. So let's look at what other clouds and so forth look like. As I got to look at more pictures of the fumes, and I wanted to get a nice satellite image, I found something else. I found this. How many people realized we had a huge hurricane right outside of New York City on 9/11? This was larger than Katrina. It was building for a longer period of time before Katrina. Katrina came and went in a fairly short amount of time. This began September 1st. And you can see the fumes coming up from ground zero, if you had a close-up picture there. But it was getting Cape Cod wet in the outer bands. And it's the eye of it is very interesting looking. It's like a bunch of worms in there. So what was its path? Well, after it passed Bermuda, it moved on up to right outside New York City, and it got larger. It spread out on 9/11. And then after the day was done, it got tighter again and moved on out of town. Very interesting path. There's an image from space, from a satellite of Erin. This is the day before 9/11. New York's over here. It covered a large amount of area. And what was the weather forecast that day? Here we are, the morning of September 11th. Oh, look at these sunny skies. And what have we out here? Anything? We should have something like this here. That's the area covered by Hurricane Erin. It seemed to be missing in the morning weather broadcast. Why didn't we know about this Category 3 at the time? But did they know it was going to make a U-turn and pull back out to sea? Sunny day. They do say rough seas, but that was it. Yeah, I'll say. I understand that they had various ships that they put out to sea. Then folks say, well, it was because they had foreknowledge of 9/11 and they went out to guard the area. But I think you don't want ships at dock when you have a big storm. What did it look like from the space station? Well, this is another hurricane, Hurricane Ivan, as viewed from the space station. They get a good look at these things. So how did they miss Hurricane Erin? This was a film in New York City.
Long a staple of space missions, took on new poignancy in mid-September when Culbertson and his crewmates viewed the plumes of smoke rising from New York City shortly after the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center.
As we went over Maine, we could see New York City and the smoke from the fires. Our prayers and thoughts go out to all the people there and everywhere else. Here I'm looking up and down the East Coast to see if I can see anything else. And to the people in Washington.
And Frank, that's an accurate assessment.
And I hope that the people responsible are caught and brought to justice as soon as possible. But first, our prayers and condolences to all involved. And I just wanted the folks to know that their city still looks very beautiful from space. I know it's very difficult for everybody in America right now. And I know folks are struggling very hard to deal with this and recover from it. But the country still looks good, and for New Yorkers, your city still looks great from up here.
Imagine how they had to zoom in with that camera and aim carefully so they wouldn't get Hurricane Erin. That's a very narrow slot between the clouds to get down there to see that. Also, notice how much material is coming up. The towers have both gone poof. This isn't fire. Why would dust be floating up into the atmosphere? And here's another hurricane, as viewed from above. I wonder why they didn't see Hurricane Erin. Again, here's the path of it, and the various sizes it was along the way. Here's the relative size of Hurricane Katrina when it made landfall. This was a big hurricane, and was forecasted to be stronger. So there we are. This is the path it took, and the various satellite images I located along the way. It's coming up on Bermuda. There's Bermuda. You can see Bermuda here. Notice how it got bigger. Expanded outward. and then it tightened back up the next day, and it moves directly east and on out. So let's look at those 3 days surrounding 9/11. And notice they're all the same scale, and this is the same size circle. It's tight in here, and then it's spread out larger, and then it's like it pulled its arms in and regrouped. Wonder what that's all about. There it is coming up on Bermuda. Here. And then it passes Bermuda. What was interesting is that day before is when they dropped it at Bermuda, they dropped it down to a tropical storm as it picked up to a Category 3. Thought that was interesting. No problem, it's going away. And the newspapers said, CNN has a report that, it's going northwest and it's going out to sea. We don't need to worry about it ever again. Going northwest from Bermuda, it's headed directly to New York City. Here we have Katrina and Erin. And we were so worried about Katrina. Erin's not to be concerned with. 169 knots, 262 knots, 273 knots. Look at the Katrina predictions. Much less. In almost every case, Erin was predicted to be a much, much bigger storm. But we didn't hear about it before 9/11. I found this interesting. They studied this beginning August 16th through September 24th. 10 universities studied Hurricane Erin 2 weeks before it was born till a week after the end of it. Kind of interesting. Unprecedented data collection. So what do storms do? What are some characteristics of storms? Let's forget everything we've been taught and just observe. So if we observe, we get water spouts, and if they're over land, they call them tornadoes. Or if they're over the desert, I guess and they're dry, they're dust devils. Myrtle Beach, just before 9/11, had this interesting tornado right on the beach, and there wasn't another cloud in the sky. I thought that was interesting. Oh, they're even on Mars. And last fall was this big hurricane in Toronto. They all look kind of similar. And here's from Hurricane Andrew. We have some stab wounds. A 2x4 goes right through the tree. Kind of interesting. I think we've all heard about straw going through trees and think it's a myth, or it just flies fast enough it goes through trees. How about plywood? How can you get plywood going through a tree? Jellification? Don't know. A lot of straw in trees. Turns out there's a Russian study about this and about other characteristics how you get field effects from these storms. This one happened just a couple of weeks ago. It was in quite a few newspapers. This fellow saying, "I swear I could see cars floating." Yeah, we do see cars sitting up in trees. How does that happen? See if this, okay. Very recent. I'll go through a few times. It's a security camera. Cars just jump up and dance. Didn't affect the cars next to it. Just a few weeks ago. It's kind of interesting. So how did this car get here? It doesn't look like it's too scratched up. It hasn't been tumbling around. I don't see any dents on it. And this wooden fence doesn't look damaged. The only way I can imagine that car got there, it was levitated and then gradually, gently lowered onto that fence. It didn't crash down onto that fence. We have more of these. How come this one's upside down? The ones on either side don't look damaged at all. You just get this car flipping over. Interesting. Other things, it doesn't look like these cars tumbled. And we get missing material. I don't see any stab wounds in this building, just the material's gone. Same with this apartment building. The whole building's gone there. Kind of reminds me of another scene. Now you see it, now you don't. Just gone. And if you've seen my earlier work, I was fascinated with the instant rust we see all around Ground Zero. And so I found this quite interesting. The underside of the car rusted. So what do these look like? Well, if this image reminds you of something you've seen before in your life, you remember how you felt when you saw that scene. You could feel the storm coming. You knew it was a big storm. You feel it. You're feeling the field effects. And weird things happen between this cloud layer and the ground. It's like there's a potential between the two. These little fingers get ready to strike. This isn't a big windstorm. This is something that's getting ready to turn into a tornado. And here's one of those big shelves that made a storm clouds.
I've got a wide angle.
This one comes up from the ground. It doesn't come down from above, but it joins from above. This is a slow motion of it. You can watch it come up from the ground here and join this in above. That there's some kind of potential between the two that brings them together. But if you're like I am, you remember feeling what that area looks like, what it feels like. Sort of like it smells like a storm.
Did you see above our heads? Look above.
Sorry, coming this way.
Look above you, right here.
This is coming from the ground. Look at that.
Oh my God. You fired a shot. Shoot.
I'm shooting.
Good.
Hey, look at the funnel.
Oh my God, look at the funnel. This is incredible. We're backing up.
We are. Oh, I hope he backs up. He's going to be right in the middle of that.
Oh my God, are you getting this, Katie?
I'm getting it.
I gotta get some shots. Hang on.
Ow!
Sorry.
Look at this baby. Ah, stop. Look at this.
Tell me what it's doing.
It grew into a monster. So we know that there's some kind of a potential between these two, and there's some sort of a field effect here. And it started getting me to think that maybe this is like various things that John has in his lab, but on a much smaller scale. I started looking at the shapes of these. Big flat top and ground, and it's like two plates, but it always has a stem up the middle. Huge storm cloud. Sydney, Australia, I believe. That's a mirrored image, but here's part of it with the electrical. Remind you of anything you saw in John's videos? To me, it starts looking like a big Tesla coil. Where here you have the stem, and then you have the big loop at the top. So if we look at the anatomy of a hurricane, it's got this spiral going up the middle. Same with big thunderclouds. Water conducts. And if you have a coil that you've wrapped round and round and round that conducts, it seems to me you have something very similar to a Tesla coil on a large scale. So this is the cloud at the top. And here, I like to show this spectrum. We have a wide variety of wavelengths to pick from, or mix and match, pick and choose, combine. A lot of things can be going on. We know that we can get a magnet and get voltage out of it, or we can get voltage and turn it into a magnet. What about the Earth's magnetic strength? Various coils. I think this is actually one of John's coils here. Some of John's samples where you have wood and aluminum and a knife. I think that one was it looks like it just kind of melted into the other material. So what about the magnetic effects? Well, let's review what happened that day. I say WTC1 got its hole. I'm not going to make any assumptions how the hole appeared. Maybe the Roadrunner left a solar passage. But that was at 8:46. WTC2 got a hole in it at 9:02, 9:03. WTC1 went poof, close to 10 a.m. WTC1 goes poof at about 10:30. Then at the end of the day, WTC7 goes poof. So let's see what the Earth's magnetic strength was at that time. WTC1 gets its hole, WTC2 gets its hole. Do you notice a downward notch and an upward notch? For some reason it seems like one reverses the other one at that time. Just coincidence. WTC2 goes poof and WTC1 goes poof. 30 minutes in between the two. WTC2 goes poof, WTC1 goes poof. Did one stop the other, whatever was drifting? And it's interesting how it kind of wanders the rest of the afternoon until WTC7 goes poof. Like that somehow was to end some process that was going on. And these are particular stations where this was monitored and different signals. They all picked up whatever anomaly was going on. That's when the two towers went poof. But what was going on in here? Something was drifting. Well, there's something interesting that we noticed. This is mid-afternoon. Here's Building 7, lathering up for its demise. And we're looking over the Winter Garden shortly before WTC7 goes poof. And look at the right-hand side. It's kind of like a fish tank. Why is that image warped? Why is it not clear? It's mighty curious. There's something happening in space. This is from a very recent article. May 22nd. Developed in the Star Wars program. They have the capability of triggering floods, hurricanes, droughts, and earthquakes. And I believe it was 1977, there was a treaty signed between the U.S. and Russia that they would not use weather. Imagine the implications. Worldwide, climate change. Let's look at the 2001 hurricane season. That was Hurricane Erin. Let's look at the other hurricanes here. Erin was the first big hurricane of the season, and we didn't hear about it. A whole bunch of other little ones. There's only 2 other significant hurricanes that year. And the year after that, there weren't too many that you started getting a whole lot of them. We recently had an earthquake in Indiana. Right after that earthquake, look what happens with the clouds. I'm not saying which comes first, the chicken or the egg, but it seems like they're interacting. Like maybe something caused the earthquake, and then that affected the weather. This is where we had that earthquake, and here's the swirly pattern. Remember, those clouds were straight, and then they turned into the swirl. When looking at the World Trade Center and trying to figure out why it made such a small seismic impact on the ground, I was looking at the equivalent TNT of earthquakes. And World Trade Center is way up here, but you go down the list, and here's the recent China earthquake, 7.9, and then this one we had in 2004, a 9.1. That's a huge earthquake. It goes up exponentially. And I thought this was mighty interesting. 160 trillion tons of TNT is enough energy to fault the Earth through its center, to split the planet. And that's the same amount of energy the Earth receives every day from the sun. Magnitude of 12 is equivalent to the 160 trillion tons of TNT. How should we use this energy? Let's see where the energy goes on planet Earth right now. See if we'd like it to stay that way. inside each of us, we know the truth. We have the ability to know the truth. And we have the ability to decide what happens. And I think we need to. I'm really concerned about what powers are out there and what it can do. And more power to do what? To destroy the planet? There's so much wonderful energy that comes to this planet. It's nice to spread it around to all those creatures. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're on. Okay, so John, do you want to come up also? And we're going to do some Q&A. So questions can go either to John or to Judy. All right? Got it?
Here. This gentleman? No? Okay.
Good one, Judy. Excellent. Fantastic. Yes.
Beautiful.
High five. Works.
You have a question?
Yes.
No question. You answer them all. Okay, I am here. Where should I stand?
Judy, I wanted to ask you a question. The term you used, dustification, I think is what it was. Very interesting. It made me think immediately of the term liquefaction. In an earthquake, when the ground is shaking long enough, even hard ground will get to the consistency of liquid, and things can't stand and so forth. You didn't say outright, but it seemed to be implying that there's the possibility of something maybe along the lines of a weapon that could have turned these buildings into dust or something like that. Now, very interesting. I had never thought of that, but also that this was possibly orchestrated to coincide with a weather event like a hurricane, and also orchestrated to coincide with terrorists attacking the Twin Towers. This is a huge thought, and you didn't say anything like that outright, but is this what we're to infer?
In my earlier work, I look at each of the pieces of evidence, and none of it adds up to a fire, causing a building to collapse. I touched on that some here. You could see the rolled-up carpet images. Where'd the building go? This is not explained by any sort of collapse whatsoever. Or that bubbler picture, that's not a collapse. So why were we told it was a collapse? And why do we have the leaders of the military-industrial complex signing off on a NIST report saying it was a collapse? I find that interesting. And that's why I have a lawsuit against them. It's the only legal avenue that we as citizens have for holding folks accountable. At a minimum, manufacturers of directed energy weapons know what John's, on a very small scale, what that can do. They see the building fall to dust. They've seen what I showed you and how the material keeps breaking down. Why would it keep breaking down? There's also images of steel beams flying through the air. They never land. It's like ice cream melting. They just turn into dust on the way down before they ever hit the ground. The seismic impact was less, on Tower 2, was less than the King Dome when they blew it up. Doesn't make sense. And we don't know how they did it, but I've been looking at various details, and this hurricane seems very interesting. And it does create large-scale field effects. And we have seen evidence, of the boards going through trees and other random things.
This question is for John. For someone who likes to tinker around, what's, a good way to start playing with the kind of properties of the battery technology that you're working with?
Tinkering. No, I don't like that word. I really don't. They use stumbling scientists, tinkering, modern day inventor. Ouch. What was the question again?
Not the best choice it was. For someone who likes to play with different things and is interested in that battery technology, what would you suggest to someone who's interested?
Right now, I've had it actually on Tech TV on how to do it, but what I'm doing now is put all this stuff on network TV, and what you want to do now is look in and study on zero-point energy, as well as look at some of the stuff actually on the internet. There's a fair amount on the internet on these crystalline batteries. But my main goal is to get it out there to everybody. So basically a shake and bake, shake and bake method of producing it on your own. And that's what our network TV show will be teaching people. So anybody can make it. Now, I must say that the military-industrial complex folks, they have actually battery replacers that work on junction barrier technology. And it's been around for a long time. I have diagrams of it, and I got it confirmed through Black Ops friends, but it's not in the public domain, so it's a bit strange, I think, that it's not in the public domain, but I don't know. I don't know their thinking, why they don't have it out there. And the technology? It's crystal power cells. And what the military have is what they call junction barrier technology batteries. It consists of a junction barrier that vibrates at a high rate on a magnetic core with a very fine wire around it with incorporated in the battery are capacitors which will charge up and give you the working energy. And they're called the military battery replacers. They've been around for a very, very long time. Yeah, I think there's some out there. Okay, well, this should be out there somewhere, bits and pieces of it. I'm kind of lazy. I don't promote that kind of thing much. I just let other people do my work, kind of the scientists, and they whatever, write it up or put the mixtures out there. I'm not good at YouTubes.
This question is for Judy. Presuming the U.S. has this technology and is willing to use it, we now have military targets, obviously outside the U.S., to use this on. Has anyone or have you done any research showing, potential weather anomalies or earthquake anomalies in Iraq or Afghanistan or in other areas of operation?
I'm sure there are. I haven't looked at it carefully because what would you call an anomaly? It's just a coincidence. Like the recent thing in China, there's a strange anomaly over that. It's a long streak. There are lots of earthquakes in a long line. Really cold clouds right over where that earthquake happened. So it's worth studying. It's quite intriguing. What I see with 9/11 is we had buildings that went away. And something caused them to go away. Something caused the material to break down. The molecules kept breaking down more and more and more.
Okay. And assuming I'm a layman, if I want to find or at least explore it more with my limited knowledge, would you recommend any areas that I would go, say online or any?
On my website, in the new Erin series, I've got various links to other things.
Okay.
Information.
All right. Thank you.
Judy, this question is for Judy. Have you had any sense of personal danger as a result of going public with this information?
Yes. People around me getting killed. But I like to think of what needs to be done in the future. This is a serious issue, what's going on. And if I didn't pursue this, would anyone else? And I have a feeling that we won't have a world much longer unless folks do sit up and take notice of what's happening.
Dr. Wood, I know that most of the people that were in the buildings when they turned to dust were pulverized, but there were some bodies recovered. Were there any effects that were noted that you're aware of on the bodies that were recovered for their molecules Was there any?
Well, we do know that there's been a lot of people like Renee Davila who have died from inhaling this molecular dissociation material. That's got to be disastrous for about anyone. I've also seen some pictures of, like, there's a hand that looks like every blood vessel exploded. And I have seen pictures of live people right after Tower 2 got its hole, before either building went poof, who had blood vessels bursting on the surface of their skin or below the surface. And that, to me, is kind of interesting.
Do you think that this might have something to do with the HARP project?
I see. I don't know. I don't know what the HARP project does. There's various statements about what it can do, but there's something that can control weather. I don't know what it is or where it is. Yeah.
Okay, I actually have kind of an observation. It's a little bit lighter, I guess.
Good.
And that is that we saw how the girders, the steel beams, bent rather than creased. Mm-hmm. That kind of reminded me of how the crop formations, how the wheat bends, they also don't crease. They kind of flop over, get kind of soft apparently, and there is a residual molecular DNA change in those. Maybe there's some kind of a comparison to see if it's, I don't know. I think the crop circle thing might be good, but might be similar manipulation of energy or whatever.
The Star Wars program that they've been doing, it's pretty well known that it's an offensive weapon rather than a defensive weapon, like they've been telling us. You didn't say this, but do you think that the Star Wars program has something to do with this?
Yes. My first big series that I posted on my webpage, it's called the Star Wars Beam Weapons, because I was convinced it had something to do with energy, directed energy. And my definition of directed energy weapons is energy that is directed and is used as a weapon. It's a very general category. I don't know what the serial numbers are, but we know it's not a kinetic energy device. And knowing that it's something to do with energy and a weapon, and it was developed during the Star Wars program, that's why I came up with that name. And even this reference I put up here said that it was, the weather modification was developed during the Star Wars program. So yes.
I have two questions, and one is, well, I'm kind of naive. So how do you explain away the airplane theory? Were there airplanes? And the other question is, speaking of military use of this, have there been buildings in places where the United States has been doing military operations that have poofed?
The second question, yes. There's, on my webpage, I show similarities with Oklahoma City and Building 6. They look almost identical, except you have some wheat checks at the bottom of one of them. There's also in Bali, it looks the same thing. The building is gone, where it's you know, you have a building here, and then it looks like something just sliced out the building and caused it to disappear. Like at the World Trade Center complex, the middle of Building 6 is just missing. About 50% of the center is just gone, and the whole main body of Building 4 is just gone. It's just the north wing that's left, and Building 3, just about all of it was gone. There's a lot of buildings that just went poof that day. The other question, what?
They didn't have a fire.
Correct. The fires are interesting in themselves. They didn't seem to be hot fires. Like the dust cloud also that rolled down the street was actually reported to be cooler than ambient temperature. This is kind of interesting. I forgot your... Oh, the airplanes.
There were these other incidences like
Morgan Reynolds has a KTAM case involving that, and I don't get so much into the airplane thing because you don't need airplanes to ask the question. Airplanes can't cause the building to go poof. Also, the cookie cutter hole, only Roadrunner makes those kind of holes. The airplanes, the wing tip on the airplane is about yay big. It's aluminum. It doesn't slice through steel columns and totally disappear. There's no remnants of a plane found at any of the sites. So there's a lot of interesting questions there. Yes? I remember. Not on this. As you know, Dennis Kucinich.
The Senate?
Yeah, Dennis Kucinich?
Oh, yeah, I know Dennis
samples.
Kucinich, yes.
And folks have contacted him. I think from your urging, I think that would be a good idea to contact him further. But from what I've gathered, there's not a whole lot that the Senate can do or that the House can do. I think there's something else going on. Yes?
No, we have one over here.
Oh.
Judy, I have two observations to share with you.
Good.
First of all, relating to interactions in nature, I was observing with a friend the SOHO GOES X-ray satellite, where SOHO is the Solar Observatory, and seeing interconnections between earthquakes and the X-ray emission of the sun. I observed that the big Indonesian earthquake and tsunami was followed instantly within hours of the X-ray emissions of the sun just going crazy for several days. And decided to watch that display available on the internet with other earthquakes that were reported. And there were a number of other correlations of the X-ray data being very quiescent, and then right after the earthquake, going crazy for a while, for a few hours or a few days, and then settling down. At one of these episodes of alerting the friend, I don't remember if I alerted him or if he alerted me to another earthquake to watch, the GOES satellite data went down for 3 days. And then when it came back, it looked as if the data was fudged. First of all, with this, we see that there is a connection of things going on in the Earth and our solar system. And also there might be human intervention going on here, or at least people don't want us to know the truth, like the hurricane data not showing up in the weather reports. My second observation has to do with the crash of TWA Flight 800 over Long Island. That was several different explanations of explosives, but in the recovered jet engine from the bottom of the ocean, the turbine blades were bent. How do you bend material like that? I think we're dealing with some relativistic effects here, and this is a roundabout introduction to you of me, but I am the laboratory partner of Bill Harrington, whom both you and John have talked to. There are interesting things we can continue to talk to, but of course this auditorium session is being shared with everyone. Just want to know your comments on those two things I reported.
Looking at the Indiana earthquake, I don't know what caused it, but I see there's an interaction between what the clouds are doing and that particular location, as though the clouds were reacting to something, which came first. I think there's a lot of things going on that would be better if we all talked about and learned about it above board, rather than this weird roundabout, keeping the shades pulled.
I have a question for John. I've been experimenting around myself with my Van de Graaff generator, and one of the most remarkable things I noted, which is easy to reproduce, is that if I take my Van de Graaff generator and shoot out positively charged bubbles, just soap bubbles, I find that they rise. They rise against the force of gravity. And so I was kind of wondering, that kind of led me to the presumption that the Earth is like a positively charged ball, and the reason why the bubbles are rising seemingly anti-gravitationally is because perhaps the electrostatic repulsion going on between the Earth. So this would be like a very, very simplified version of gravity where it's basically caused by the electrostatic force, just a huge positively charged ball. So I would think that possibly if you charged anything up with a high enough positive charge, you could get it to go, you could get it to float. I mean, I've been able to get soap bubbles to do that. I was wondering whether you think maybe the effects that you're seeing are similar. And the cool thing about this effect is that it doesn't require, and anyone can do this particular effect. You just get a soap gun from the store and just put your hand on a Van de Graaff generator, and surprisingly, you see these soap bubbles rise. They'll go and they hit the ceiling. So I wonder what you thought about that.
Yeah, electrostatics are fun to play with. You can get all sorts of things to fly in the air, and soap bubbles or pieces of tinfoil and that kind of thing, but there's usually a limit to electrostatic units in regards to that, and these samples and that float in the air and that are quite different than electrostatics science. So, but for experimenting, I suggest people do that with electrostatics. Like the electroscope is based on electrostatic repulsion.
Do you think gravity itself is electrostatically based? Or do you
I think
it's
it plays a part. I mean, gravity, or the graviton particles, which I refer to them as, all works in the subatomic realm. So when I have these machines operating, somehow they're influencing the gravitons on a quantum scale.
Hello. Yeah, I had 3 questions. One's real brief. Have either of you heard of the book Reality Revealed and some of the theories purported in that? Are either of you familiar with the book called Reality Revealed, or some of the theory purported in that? Because I think it might be really interesting to you with what you're discussing. And
sorry, no.
Reality Revealed. Okay, and the second question is for John, which is, do you think that the Tesla effect, like of this, there was in Minneapolis there was a bridge collapse, I think last summer, and I was wondering if you thought that the Tesla effect that was of the Tesla oscillator, if the jackhammers may have created that kind of an effect with that bridge.
Oh, you're speaking of the New York Tesla experiment way back, where you're shaking the buildings around?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I was not there. If somebody's replicated that, but I know that there's papers to that piece of equipment.
Because I guess that bridge collapse was kind of unusual, and they were doing a lot of jackhammering and getting kind of an amplified vibration from some,
is that how it fell down?
From, I don't know if it was ever determined.
Sometimes you get that kind of vibration thing, though.
I happened to be there right afterwards. It was August 1st, and I was there 2 days later. And what really struck me is, how do you get 12 bridge supports to fail at the exact same moment, to the point that the bridge goes down horizontally with the cars, no cars rolled off.
Mm-hmm.
And, perfectly horizontal. And, but when I was there in person, it hadn't rained, but the ground was soaking wet from hosing it down, and people were kept like a mile away, and you couldn't see the site, and it was like SWAT teams all over the place.
Wow.
It was pretty weird.
Okay. And the third question was on August 14th of 2003, there was a large power outage along New York and Great Lakes and so forth. And I was wondering if there was any anomalies that you've come across, or any anomalous or unusual things that you've heard about in respect to that event.
One thing I do know is, at that same time, every state university I know of had a horrendous virus in the computer system. We had just started the new semester, and students couldn't change classes or anything because all the computers were down. I thought that was pretty interesting. The only time I've ever known of such a large-scale virus, computer virus, going around. I know there's other comments that folks think that maybe something with the HARP project that zapped something somewhere. I don't know of anything, but it was too weird. There's got to be a bigger story behind what we were told.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest there's something called the Minotaur Project. If you want to look into that, there's something they started up on the same day that I would assume took a lot of voltage. And
Okay,
I think
that
it was
sounds-
in Minnesota or something, so just something,
Okay.
One synchronicity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just got two quick things. So, this topic is extremely divisive in the entire 9/11 truth thing that we call the 9/11 truth thing. You said that the billowing smoke was cool, and I know that one of the common things that, I don't know, honestly, I see one thing and I see another thing and I just take it all in, but the whole melted thing and the supposed satellite imagery of temperatures, a week after. What's your comment on that, for one, with regards to the towers coming down and the melted, the temperatures that were recorded, weeks after at ground zero? And the second one is really just, where do we go from here with, we can have all these questions, but if we don't get any motion, if we don't get, these black projects that sit on the shelves of whatever, we can sit around and learn about it and talk about it and spread the word, but are we just basically pending our own doom at this point?
Well, let's see. First, you mentioned something about divisive. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
So just, you've got, I don't know what's going on, like, from one agenda to the other agenda, people are basically saying the whole split between the architects and engineers and the different thing, basically the thermite versus the directed.
I look at science. I look at evidence, and if folks want to discuss the science and the evidence, great. Let's discuss that. I'm sure you're aware of the case I have pending in the federal court, Southern District of New York, and now it comes. Good. Yeah. Okay. Because can they dismiss this? On what basis? Did that look like a collapse to you? This big, bubble of dust, and to have folks who manufacture direct energy weapons and develop direct energy weapons state that sign off a report saying that was a collapse. We need accountability, and this is one avenue in which we can get it. And if other folks have other things that they feel that they can bring forward, I encourage them to, because that's what we need to do. Is not sit and argue about this back and forth in the back room, but to actually, if anyone has good scientific evidence, by all means, take it to court, hold folks accountable, and question. And I'm very fortunate to have hooked up with this great lawyer I have, Jerry Leaphart, who realized when he saw my website, he said that is admissible evidence in a court, and found an avenue that I think that the powers that be hadn't foreseen, a way in which an avenue that we could proceed with this. That filing the RFC, the request for corrections to NIST, allowed me to have it on record that I brought this to their attention, which qualified me for a Keaton case. So that was kind of cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Judy, a few weeks ago, it was on the evening news where the Arctic ice shelf had broken loose, as they explained it. But the picture that they showed two parallel lines at least 100 meters long, perfectly straight.
I saw it even looked like ice cubes. It had right angles.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, science
I don't
doesn't
know,
happen
I
in straight
haven't,
lines.
Verified the pictures. If someone's seen my website, they can see I believe in lots of pictures from lots of sources. And if I have 10 different photographers who all photograph the same thing, from totally different directions, then I start believing it. And that was very interesting, but it's just like one photo here and one photo there. But it was pretty peculiar how it looked like somebody had cut it with a laser beam. Just nice straight cuts. Ready for a big party. Party ice. No one else saw that.
Have you found any connections between the chemtrails and these weather patterns? And
I believe
I've seen
they're
square
connected.
clouds and lots of lines in the sky.
I've also, on my website in the Erin series, on the last 2 pages, I have some reports of the high barium content. And I noticed I've got one of John's articles there too, about batteries and using barium titanate.
Yeah, barium titanate.
For batteries. And that caught my attention because, okay, do we have that as a reflective surface or a surface? Mm-hmm. And there was actually a news report on Louisiana, what was it, KS?
Oh, it was KSLA.
In the Shreveport. And I've got the video on my site. It was last November where they actually reported it. The barium results, they tested it themselves and reported it. It's a mind blower, like, cool. Let's see what else we can get them to report. The truth out here. So it's good.
John, this is a question for you. I'm down here in the front. I'm curious about the Hutchinson effect, and I'm curious if you've tried to see what is the bare minimum fields you need to reproduce the effect.
Oh, I think the bare minimum fields was when we were working with Colonel John Alexander and friends. And that was rather a primitive setup, but very dramatic in what it did do. So starting out with 455 kilohertz to 730 kilohertz up to covering quite a range up to 22 centimeters. A fair amount of bands. As I get more into more bands and more equipment, phase shifting and voltage manipulation, and that I seem to get better results. So I would have to estimate probably the lowest I could probably go on that is about 15 different frequencies, electrostatics, as well as total weight would probably be 2 tons. Because somehow this thing is dependent on weight. Extracts something out of the material itself.
If there aren't any more questions now, what we can do is finish. There are some samples up here if you want to see some of John's samples that he's worked on. Both Judy and John can be available if you want to just ask some questions privately. And I think we're good to go. And I want to thank both Judy and John very much for coming to Seattle.
Pleasure. Congratulations, Judy.
Yeah.